context on that side. Let's go to the next one. Now let's talk about the other direction of this. And I want to be clear that I'm talking about something different now. Before I was talking about understanding the context of the passage. So that means you do things like you study, well, what did Yahweh mean? What did that word mean, Yahweh? And what did it mean when they talked about immigrants and aliens? And understanding the context of what the author meant to say in writing those words. But now what I'm going to talk about is how when our world changes, and going back to our faith and saying, I understand the context of that scripture, but now the world is a different place. And so we need a different lesson. So for example, if we go to the next slide, it's going to show you, the next one, I'm sorry. It's going to show you, this is the way the people in that time lived. This is the cycle of their life. They gathered the olives, and the olives were what they used to make oil, and they pressed the olive oil. Then they would sow barley and wheat. But they couldn't sow the barley and wheat until it rained, because the ground was too hard. So they had to wait until it rained, and then they could till the land and they could sow the cereal. Then they would sow lentils, which are something that kind of regenerates the ground, and chickpeas, and put those in. Then while that stuff is growing, it was like a month or two when their activity is pulling the grass that they're going to use for hay, or pulling weeds. Then when the earth produces grain, they harvest the grain. Then at the end of the cycle, they harvest the grapes. And now they're ready to harvest the olives again. My point is, these are people who were totally connected to the land. Okay? The land drove their activities. The land meant their society in every way. And so that's the context of the scripture that comes out of it. That's not the world we live in. Okay? On the next slide, I'm going to show you the population of the earth. Now, it's kind of hard to see that graph because that green line on the bottom looks like a border, but it's not. This is all the population. It's basically immeasurable all the way up until about 1500. Okay? In the first 250,000 years, there was something called a human being. 9 billion humans lived and died in the first 250,000 years. In the 1,000 years since then, 60 billion have lived and died, and 8 of them, or 7 of them, are alive now. There are roughly as many humans alive today as lived and died during the first 250,000 years of humans. Let's look at the next one. This is the next slide. This is a graph you've seen, which is of carbon dioxide over the last 9,000 years. And you can see that at about the same time that we had that massive explosion in population, we see a massive explosion in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, changing profoundly the nature of the air on the planet. Okay? We are changing the biosphere, not the other way around. Let's do one more that's takes a little bit more explanation. Plants need nitrogen to grow. Okay, those farmers that were growing the olives and the lentils, and they need nitrogen to grow, but it has to be accessible. It has to be, quote, fixed nitrogen. The way nitrogen used to be fixed, like, real long time ago, like 1920. The way that nitrogen used to be fixed was there was a bacteria that would take nitrogen out of the air and convert it into nitrogen from the N2, which is a really hard molecule to break apart. It would convert it into N2O and N3O, and that makes it a little bit more accessible, and then they can make it into ammonia, and then the plant can use it. Okay, this bacteria would do that. The other thing that would do that is lightning, because lightning has enough energy that when lightning goes through, it breaks that bond with the nitrogen in the air. And then the other thing, humans did figure out we can help when we plant beans, legumes. They just have a nature, it's actually another bacteria that's on their roots that breaks it up, okay? So up until about 1900, that bar there gives you a measure of the amount of fixed nitrogen that was absorbed every year by the whole planet. In about 1900, a problem happened. We didn't have enough nitrogen. And the population of the earth was moving towards 2 billion, and we didn't have enough nitrogen to have 2 billion people. So a scientist named Haber came up with a way to manufacture it by passing extremely hot, extremely high pressurized air over a catalyst, and that makes human-made fertilizer. You also make it when you burn fossil fuels. But the good news from Haber's invention is that now the population can go above 2 billion, on its way to the 8 billion. Haber also did some of the most evil stuff that human beings have ever done. And I literally will leave that to the exercise of the reader, but Haber is an evil person. But he did figure out a way for us to continue living, so that's a conundrum for you. But here's the thing. By 1950, you start to see those blue lines, the dark blue and the orange lines. Those two lines represent the amount of nitrogen that's being absorbed in the planet based on human activity. And then let's go ahead and add the gray line too, because the gray line, that is human. We're planting beans, and humans are doing that, right? Dogs aren't doing that, humans are doing that. Today, the amount of nitrogen being absorbed by the planet as a result of human activity exceeds the amount that was being absorbed naturally, totally. Okay? We put more nitrogen into the earth on purpose so that we can continue being humans than the world does on its own. Okay, let's do one more. And that brings us to the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is an idea is that humans have so much impact on the world that this is a geological epoch. This is a new time that the humans are changing the globe in such a way that we cover it and we're pushing other species out and driving them into extinction in record numbers, like as if a meteor hit the planet numbers. We are changing the air profoundly. We are changing the rocks so that if all humans cease to exist today, extraterrestrial geologists in the future would come back and say, what happened? Geez, what happened right about 1,000? That changed, that planet changed at its core. Okay, and this is where we, as a people of faith, have to take in that information. And we have to recognize that when we're talking about how we address the creation, we have a responsibility that the Israelites did not have. Because they were bound by the earth, and the earth was bending them. We are bending the earth. And we have a responsibility to take our faith and to understand it in the context of the world that we live in. Because this is a gift, and we have to be good stewards, but our responsibility to be good stewards is gone up by a factor of 10 or hundreds or whatever you want to think about it. It's completely different. Because now we can make changes to the world that would have been impossible, unthinkable at the time that our scriptures were written. So that's where I'm going to end, is I'm leaving this with a challenge to you as a people of God who understand the value of science and faith, to take these lessons that we have from faith and to help us when we're making decisions about how to impact the environment. And also to take these information we have about the environment and to use it to shape our faith so that our faith continues to be relevant and that our faith continues to have the capacity to say something to the world.